What's the most creepy thing you've ever witnessed? When I was serving my time as an engineer in the Merchant Navy, we used to have to clean out what are called sea chests. They're basically big filters for seawater that we would pump in to use as coolant, and if the pumps were on, when we were dockside, we'd find all sorts of things like bottles, fish, crabs, etc. One day, we opened up the chest, pulled out the filter, and immediately saw this gold shiny thing, which turned out to be a Rolex watch. Usually we'd just dump out the filter, with the mitigating circumstances. We went through it thoroughly and found a piece of a shirt with cufflinks still attached, and last but not least, a nicely rotted finger. The police ended up closing off the dock and dredging it, but never found anything on the end. Grew up in Detroit. We were poor, and my dad was very go outside and play until the OOs. Because of this, we never had cable and rarely were let to rewatch the same few VHS we had laying around. I remember one night, I felt lucky because my parents forgot I was downstairs watching and never came to check. I remember falling asleep on the couch watching TV. During the night, I awoke to a man standing over me. Large figure, large frame. I assumed it was my dad, and he shushed me before moving around the room. I assumed he was looking for something and just being a nice dad. The next day, my family woke up, and the front door was still open from the day before. No AC. We needed the breeze. We started to notice things missing. Dad freaked out and asked if I saw anyone. It's been 25 years, but I'm pretty sure I lied because I was scared it was my fault. Dad bought a pistol that day. It sat in a wooden chair facing the front door, while everyone else slept. As a kid, I thought he was just angry and wasn't sleepy. As an adult, I know he was terrified for his kids and running on very few hours a week. I was about 8 and walking in a field along brambles with my grandmother picking blackberries and generally having a fun time. The area was walking distance from her home, so it wasn't as if we were anywhere remote. We came across a small area kind of hidden through an archway of bushes. Inside the area and underneath an overhanging tree, really secluded and off of any kind of path, we found a shallow dug rectangle grave shape with black, burned marks inside on the dirt. I remember my grandmother just saying, "Okay, let's go home," and we went home. Later on, I heard my granddad confirming with my grandmother that it would have been the spot where the guy tried to burn the body of a girl who had been recently murdered in their town. The case had been solved, but the crime scene must have just been left as that hole. It was all over the news just before that, but I was too young to really know about it. I have that photo image of how creepy that hole was to see to this day in my memory. I've always had trouble sleeping through the night, so I often wake up in the middle of the night. When I was probably 16 or 17, I woke up one night and I left my room to get a snack or some water. In the hallway I saw a figure and just dismissed it as me seeing things, so I gave it a good hard look to figure out what it was. Well, it definitely wasn't a pile of clothes or anything. It just stood there, looking at me, with its long coat and grotesquely long fingers. If you've ever seen pictures of the Hatman, it was kinda like that. Freaked me out for the night, and I checked the next morning to see if there was anything in that spot slightly resembling what I saw, but there wasn't. I had figured I was just seeing things and got over it until a week later, when we were round the dinner table and my sister started describing this strange figure that she had seen the night before, and it perfectly matched the thing that I had seen a couple of nights previously. The hush that fell over the table as everyone exchanged nervous looks when I said, "Oh, yeah, that guy. You've seen him too," was deafening. My dad installed security cameras the next day, but we never saw anything. I've since gotten over it, but damn if that didn't creep me out for a while. When I was bartending one very slow night, I ended up alone with two men. They claimed to be veterans, and one man had a serious speech issue that the other claimed stemmed from a combat injury. They were already drunk and sassy, asking for a free drunk for their service. I gave it to them with the comment that we were closing soon, hoping they would just move along. They were making lewd comments and telling dirty jokes like many other drunk men before. But my inner alarms were screaming these guys were not okay. I tried to do my closing tasks and sent a text to all my bartender friends and anyone I thought might be in the area that I needed help, and had the police department's number up on my phone. As I walked by to check on them, the one with speech issues mumbled something to me, which I didn't understand. How friend kindly translated that he had said it would be very easy to lock the front door and throw me up on the bar. They laughed. I laughed. I went to the kitchen and grabbed my favorite chef knife and ticked it next to my phone. I'm 5'1" and didn't stand a chance against men, especially if they were ex-combat vets. Thankfully, a very drunk friend responded to my text and came in to save me. He led them to the next bar and I tried to process the evening. That knife became my closing alone friend. Never count on anyone to save you, and never joke about raping people. It will haunt them forever. I grew up somewhere very rural, no streetlights and far away from any town with them. At night it was dark. My bedroom door also never closed properly. You could latch it but it would pop open if you pushed the door lightly. One night I woke up suddenly, without knowing why. As my mind tried to make sense of things, I looked to my left, towards the bedroom door. I could see the outline of a figure. In the tiny amount of pre-dawn light I could just see a white shape, long dark hair hanging down and sunken eyes. I could also hear it breathing. After a few seconds of absolute mind-bending horror, where I literally felt every hair stand on end, it took a step into my room, out of the dark hallway. The hallway had no windows, so my room was slightly lighter. The change of the light also changed the face slightly. I could see it more clearly. I saw that it was in fact my mother's face and she was sleepwalking. She very occasionally did, and also had a lot of other sleep problems, including very vivid nightmares. She quickly left and went back to bed. Fortunately for my own sanity, I never saw her sleepwalk again. My husband was a sleepwalker for some years until he gave up alcohol. He was terrifying because sometimes he'd leap right out of bed and run through the house at top speed until he hit a wall. Once, he knocked himself clean out and I had to call an ambulance. He had a massive lump on his head. He also has a sleep disorder called hypnagogia, and that makes him hallucinate and be in a sort of half-sleep, half-wake state. And when he's like that, he sees trails of lights, which he's compelled to follow looking for the source. I know people say not to wake sleepwalking people, but I always do and he just wakes up. He doesn't die or have a heart attack lol. We had a neighbor who moved out and came back a year later for a visit. He brought with him his 2 kids and an Asian woman he claimed was his wife. He claimed it was the same wife he used to have and that she just lost weight and had a makeover. But we remember the wife as a really tiny woman, 5'1" or so, with wavy bob hair. This new one was about 5'6" with long straight black hair. Looked younger too. Even she took off her sandals and I saw even without sandals she was about 5'6". While on vacation he told the neighbor of his vacation home that his wife died of a brain tumor. I began to wonder where his wife really was. I think he really just sent her back to her Asian home country. But it was creepy to see him trying to pass off the new one as his wife. About 25 years ago, a few days after my cousin's wedding, a large group of us decided to go out drinking one night in Portland. We decided to walk from my aunt's house to the bar and back so no one would be driving. On the way back from the bar, we cut down a dark residential street, and there was a large guy just standing there holding a hammer. It's like 2 a.m. and there is this large guy just standing in the street holding a hammer. A few of us asked what he was doing as we walked by, but he just stood there watching us as we walked down the street. The guy never said a word. Luckily, there were 12 of us in the group because who knows what this guy was up to. He gave off some creepy Jason Voorhees vibes, that's for sure. Very recent story, not even a week old. Weird stuff has been happening in the house I'm staying in for months, starting when I was out of town for 2 weeks. When I'd wake up in the morning, after I'd come back from a trip, or after I'd come home from a night out, furniture had been moved, dishes had been washed, laundry had been folded, and a host of other weird things. Always good things, and nothing was ever stolen. I went through so many different possibilities. I started sleepwalking for the first time. I have carbon monoxide poisoning. There's a ghost in the house. I'm blacking out from stress. There's someone coming in and out of the house. I searched the house so many times for another person and never found anyone. And I was slowly going crazy trying to figure out what was happening. I honestly thought I was having a psychotic breakdown at one point. The pinnacle was when I woke up one morning and all of my trash had been taken outside, put inside the trash bins. The trash bins had been rolled out to the curb, and in all the trash bins in sight had new bags in them. Things finally started slowing down and things weren't being moved anymore. But I was hearing what sounded like people walking on the roof above me. My friends told me it was probably just squirrels, so I waved it off. Until last Friday, when I walked upstairs at 2 a.m., and the crawl space door was wide open. I called the sheriff's and it turned out there was homeless people living inside the walls of my house on and off for months, right next to my bedroom. They were sneaking in through a faulty door lock and window. A had broke. S21 in Cambodia and the killing fields. The results of genocide, which occurred between 1975 and 1980. I visited in early 2000s. S21 was the secret center of a network of nearly 200 prisons where people were tortured by the Khmer Rouge. Pol Pot took control of the city and country, and ordered anyone with an education or who wore glasses out of the cities and into rice fields. Despite having no knowledge of the land, if they couldn't grow crops, they were killed or starved to death. Those that resisted were imprisoned in concentration camps, with S21 being one of the main ones. It was originally a school, a place of education and peace. It was transformed into prison of torture. Each classroom was modified to have multiple brick cubicles built inside them, similar to maybe a gym bathroom. Each classroom housed 30 to 40 prisoners. They were not allowed to shower or use the toilet. Once a month, prisoners were hosed down through the windows. There was also a process of choosing to kill an entire family, including children and babies. I forget the term, but basically, it was the idea that if one part of a tree is diseased, it is best to cut the entire tree down including the roots. There were 30,000 imprisoned at S21 over the period of Pol Pot's regime. One of many converted school torture camps. Men, women, children and babies. There was a practice of using babies for target practice. There were photos of this. From the 30,000 prisoners, there were only 12 survivors. When you visit S21, you can freely wander around the school grounds, enter the cells, stand in the torture chambers. You could feel the death and pain from the walls. Just down the road from S21 is what is known as the killing fields. This is where tens of thousands of bodies are buried in mass graves, all of whom went through the torture camps, all who were victims of Pol Pot's regime. I was told buses of people were brought in on a regular basis with those who would be brought here for their execution. You were sent here to your death if you were educated, if you wore glasses, if someone in your family did, if you resisted or refused orders. When Pol Pot was overturned, the locals collected skulls and bones and built towers with them to honor them. Giant shrines of tens of thousands of human skulls and bones are erected there. Parts of the killing fields were still littered with bones and clothing that they wore when executed. You could see patches of dirt that the wind and rain had eroded away, with bones, clothing and items visible in the dirt. This whole experience was one of the most humbling yet terrifying things I've seen that occurred on this planet, and I still sometimes can't believe these atrocities occur in my lifetime. In Baghdad, almost 20 years ago, I was working alone at night with a busted-up small dozer with one swinging headlight. I would get off from time to time and do shovel work. One time, I noticed a bunch of eyes glowing off in the distance, like 5 or 6 sets, just staring at me. I didn't think too much about it and went on working. After a few minutes I picked me head up again and noticed the eyes were still there, but closer. I wasn't sure if they were harmless or what, so I continued working but didn't turn my back to them. After a few more minutes I picked my head up again and they are gone. Sweet. Now I don't have to be concerned, I thought. I worked for a few more minutes and looked up and noticed all the eyes again, but they had moved around from the first eye and were behind me and close enough. I could now make out what they were in the blackness with the one single swinging dim headlight. They were a pack of feral dogs looking at me like I would make a good meal. They were standing on a berm I had made, maybe 4 foot high. I grabbed a big dirt clod and charged at them, yelling as I ran and tossed the clod in their direction. They didn't flinch, oh, I thought, so I get back on the dozer and take off towards them with it. I get closer and start going up the berm, and only then do they start walking briskly away. However, they stopped a short distance away and stared. Luckily, shortly after another dump truck came by and I got a ride out of there. I was hiking a little outside of Vancouver in a densely wooded area, owned to have many cougars, mountain lions. I had my dog with me, who was a huge, tall thing, part Irish wolfhound and fiercely loyal. We had been hiking for about an hour and were far enough back by then that we hadn't seen anyone else in quite some time. I stopped at a log to take a short break. We'd been sitting there for about 5 minutes. My dog goes stiff, hackles up, and starts growling while staring into the dense brush. I stare into the woods, but can't see anything at all. It's gone quiet though, that kind of eerie silence the forest takes on sometimes. The dog is still growling, looking at a spot about 6 feet off the ground. I decide it's time to get out of there and take up a quick pace back the way we came. The dog lets me get a bit ahead, then stops growling and follows me. He's anxious though and keeps stopping to check behind us. We get about 15 minutes down the path and the dog stops again, facing the woods along the path, and barks a sharp 3 or 4 times, then resumes growling intensely. I keep moving and he sort of stiff-legged walks a few steps, stops and growls, catches up to me, walks a few more steps growling, etc. He occasionally barks. I cannot for the life of me see anything in the woods. No movement, no animals, nothing. The whole hike back goes like that. I never see a thing. Once we reached a bridge, and more people, my dog finally relaxes and stops growling, barking. But he's still keen to get out of there. I've always assumed it was a cougar stalking us. We never went back there.